I'm not gonna lie. The energy in New York City lately has been so electric and alive and exciting, and so I've been outside. Reading has kind of taken a back seat, which I guess is okay. Even in all of that, I have come across a book that has become an all-time favorite read. We've read about cults, we read about yearning. I did manage to find my way into a slump vis-a-vis being outside, but was also like yanked out of it by a really cool read. There was just a point there where I was picking things up and putting them down, and my attention span was kind of frayed, and I couldn't find the thing that was like holding my attention. Which brings us to the sponsor of today's video, besties over at Book of the Month. If you don't know what Book of the Month is, it's an online book subscription, and it looks through all of the books that are coming out and offers a short list for readers to choose from. And it varies across genres, so there could be fantasy, romance, contemporary fiction, genre fiction in those boxes. But something new that Book of the Month is doing that really excites me is the Offset collection. Guys, this is precisely and specifically for us. The Offset is a collection of titles that are indie published or translated lit, definitely off the beaten path, and leans way into lit fic. It tends to highlight nuanced, complex, weird books that are more thinky and play a lot with gray area. In a world where I feel like we're matrix dodging a lot of like conventional algorithm-y reads, the Offset steps in with such a cool alternative. And like with all Book of the Month picks, they tend to champion debut novels, and so you're always getting a fresh new voice, because I think even in the lit fic world, there tends to be an algorithm that runs pretty deep. Learning is July's pick for the Offset. This book was super philosophical and super introspective and also steeped in the mundane, but then the mundane morphs and it becomes this like eerie thing, but then it was also really funny, and it's a teeny tiny novella, which is pretty good when your attention span is fighting for its life. Had it not been for the Offset, I don't know that I would have come across this novel. Courtney Bush is a poet, and something that I really liked about this novel is that it had like that poet sensibility and curiosity and play with language, but this is her debut novel and it was published by a tiny publishing house, so I already really want to reread it, and I had so much fun with it. Yeah, had it not been for the Offset, I don't know if it would have come across my lap. The Offset is just a collection that I'm really excited about. I think it's a really cool initiative for the readers who like more twisty, complex reads, and I think if you like the books we talk about here, you'd really vibe with the books that are offered by the Offset. And if you click the link in my description, you get your first month for $9.99, and then you also get a cutie little hat. I just wanted to say thank you so much again to Book of the Month for sponsoring this video. So I will be talking about this one later, but the first book I want to talk about is Strange Girls by Sarvat Hassan. Oh my god, this was so good. Okay, I'm gonna start off with a quote. At the very end of the novel, she says, "It doesn't have to be a different life or too late. I can learn to be brave in this one." That sounds like a normal whatever quote, but the way that this gutted me this absolutely destroyed me. The last like 100 pages I had to sit in my car for alternate side parking, so I like went to the back seat, was like going through it, I had the gnarliest lump in my throat, flipped the last page, and I was just like, we're fine, we're fine, we're fine. And then I started sobbing. I really, really loved this book. I think that what Hassan managed to fit in this book and the way that she handled all of the explorations that she was interested in were so well done. It was incredible. It's a novel about two young women who meet in college. They're both writers, and they initially connect over their writing in like a discussion board comment section kind of thing. Ava would post something and Aaliyah would respond, or then Aaliyah would post something and Ava would respond, and they would give each other feedback. All of their classmates were giving feedback, but the feedback that each of these women gave to each other was so specific. It was the kind of feedback that challenged them, saw them, and from this back and forth in the like discussion board forum comment section, a really deep friendship emerges between them. They eventually meet, and their friendship becomes one that's really fulfilling. Ava is like the central force in Aaliyah's life. She has something that Aaliyah is learning from and is drawn to, and there is an intensity in their friendship because I think Ava also learns and pulls from Aaliyah in different ways, and Aaliyah travels to Karachi every summer. They maintain their relationship through like these Skype calls, but also through these letters, and it's just this bond that becomes closer as the relationship becomes more enmeshed and like the boundaries start to blur. The intimacy starts to flow in just one direction. It's a lot of Ava feeling very close to Aaliyah and Aaliyah seemingly being very close to Ava, but the question that starts to emerge in the novel is like, how close can someone be when you've kind of put walls up? And I think what the novel starts to look at is what are the different things that force us to put those walls up. One of the explorations in this novel is that Aaliyah is from Pakistan, and so there are a lot of like cultural pressures that she's moving around. One of the earlier scenes, she's at a workshop and people are kind of like, well, you have this immigrant experience, so you should be writing about it. And because she wasn't immediately speaking about that, her classmates found her illegible. There was a desire to make her fit into this box, a schema, and the stereotype, and that's not what she was interested in. She tries to just assert who she is outside of all of these other definitions that would kind of box her into something before she was ready to define that for herself. There's also a lot of the interactions between Ava and Aaliyah, like they'll be talking about dating and Aaliyah's like, I could never see myself with a boy, can you? And Ava's like, I don't know, and she's like, ugh, yuck, boys. It's a very subtle scoffing and distancing herself at like the scripts that we have to fit in. And I think like throughout the novel, Aaliyah is constantly trying to push against those scripts, even though they're coming at her from all angles. The way that they relate to their art changes over the years, the kind of prominence that each woman had in the art world and how that sort of shifts and morphs, changes shape. This novel also explores when you are in such a close, tangled, boundaryless relationship, how much of those relationships should you share? Who has like custody over what in a relationship when both of the people are artists? What is sacred within your relationship? What is okay to become art and shared and publicized? And then when that piece of your relationship becomes public, how do you cope with a person's perspective of a thing that you both lived through? It was just like there are so many questions in this novel about art making, about shared experiences, about cultural identity and being legible and pushing against that. But also when those cultural pressures kind of dictate the parameters of your life, what does that mean for you? What are the pieces of you in those things that kind of get snuffed? There is like a branching of something else that emerges and you embark on a different life. And it's different. It's not worse or better. It's different. But how do you sort of reconcile the parts of you that you've given up? How do you cope with who's left? Do you like the person who's left? This person has made concessions. Are you okay with that? Like, it was just, there are so many questions in this and it was so good and it was really heartbreaking. I think Hassan's exploration of culture and religion as a person who's trying to individuate and how sometimes you can't escape that, I thought that was so well done, especially as it like first came in through the writing. She almost tried to practice it in her writing, but that 2D version is nothing compared to like the actual pressures. And you kind of see how when someone makes the suggestion that Aaliyah likes girls, she's not overt in her reaction, but it like changes something in her. And so then she starts to scurry for the traditional in order to feel safe. What's also heartbreaking is that Ava attempted to offer her that sense of safety. It's just when you have something so tall and so established and so institutional like culture and religion, how do you sort of push against that? And then something else that I just really like is Ava's a very externalizing character and Aaliyah tends to be more internalized. And throughout the novel, this sort of like personality trait becomes dimensional. And so oftentimes you'd get like these long soliloquies of Ava complaining about this, that, and the third. And then Aaliyah would be going through these really profound like questions about identity and self. But because Aaliyah is someone who's so internalized, it would show up as just like a sentence. And then she would move on to something else. And I'm like, whoa, wait, can we go back? And it was just like these profound concerns that Aaliyah would come up against, but then kind of subvert. Just left me feeling so much hurt for Aaliyah, wanting more for her, wanting her to be more brave. And so when she says, it doesn't have to be a different life or too late, I can learn to be brave in this one, yeah, I'm not gonna be okay. I think this for me brought up a lot of questions about like what is the kind of life you live when you tuck a lot of yourself away and don't allow others to see you. This is a theme that I am constantly taken with in writing because for a long time I was someone who tried to make myself as easy as possible, as digestible as possible. In fear, it's something that like in theory, you know, like you can show up as yourself, as large as yourself. You can show up with all of your questions. You don't have to have the answers to everything and you can work through that with others. You can be difficult. And that's okay. And there's this question of like a person being difficult even when they intend to be as easy as possible. But yeah, just who you show up or who you allow yourself to show up as in relationships and like allowing yourself to be seen in that and not sabotaging the thing. And just like bravery and love and bravery in the kind of life that you see for yourself, the person who you are, accepting who you are and living fully in that. Yeah, and just what happens when you don't. It's different. It's not bad, but like again, there is something that you've given up and how do you reconcile that? I just thought it was so layered. I have also not been able to shut up about this. I have recommended it to literally anyone who would listen to me. I just thought it was such a packed novel. I also think if you liked, I just read Isagal Shabaz's writing. I think you would like, they have very similar like writing style, like the restraint and the flow and how, I don't know, Sarbat's pen, I really like it. The writing was wonderful. The story was wonderful. The themes that she was exploring was wonderful. All of the questions that she posed in this and like not everything had an answer. And I think the ending was a really creative, beautiful way to address all of the questions. Stunning. absolutely stunning. I adored this. The next book I read, The Colony by Annika Norlund. This is translated by Alice Olsen from Swedish. So basically, there's this chick and she works in a stressful job and she's like, you know what, I've had it. And so she flees. She goes to like her grandmother's home in the Swedish forest and she goes to that home. I think someone's in the house, but she's like in the forest around there, and she's taking a walk, and as she's taking a walk she looks down, and in a clearing there's a group of people, and she's like, this is strange, because they're all in like tech gear, like outdoor techie gear, but they're all like eating chicken and thanking it like for every bite, and they just seem sus. What she discovers is a cult that is existing in this forest. It's a cluster of people and then one like teenage child that trails them constantly. Our chick Emily, she like goes into a random trailer that she finds, and then she runs into the teen, and so they meet. As the story continues, it's like a non-linear story that bounces from present to past, and we start to see all of the different perspectives of all of the different people that are in the group and what led them to being there. And I think what was interesting to me about this novel is how incidentally everything happened, how kind of naturally they slipped into this way of life, and how when people started to question the reason why they were there, if what they were doing was okay, how easily then to like fall into groupthink and be like, no, everything is fine. It was really fascinating. I think all of the characters were really interesting. There was the cult leader, and there are pictures of her charisma. She goes to this retreat thing. There's a guru there, and he's also very charismatic. It's how he has his whole like retreat following. Well, very like Bikram yoga Netflix documentary, if you guys have seen that. It's really interesting to see like two people who are very charismatic and are very used to like people trusting their energy and trusting their word kind of confront each other, and like what happens when two people like that meet. There were questions about passivity in life. There were questions about like when you experience harm in life and you hold on to that harm, what happens. Also, there were a lot of questions about like desire, like when you desire something and you just cannot get it, and the desire is not something that you can fulfill yourself. It's dependent on someone else giving that to you. How do you cope with that? How do you deal with that? It also had to do with like community and like how you guys stand up for each other. What are the bonds that link you together? How do you create a new language with people who you have like once been stranger to? When that becomes not fruitful, how do you eventually part? This book is a book that I read with the book club that I'm a part of, and the ending was bananas. I think the ending felt a little bit rushed and like not as thought through as the questions that came up in the novel, but I thought the interrogations that came up throughout the novel were really fascinating, and I had a really good, like, it felt propulsive but also very atmospheric. It had really, really interesting questions about human nature, how we exist with our own idiosyncrasies within a community. I thought it was really fun. The next book I read was Yearning by Courtney Bush. This book was bananas. I loved it. This is also a very character study book and very philosophical, but this one had a bit more of a plot. And something else that I really liked about this is that I love a book with a child narrator, because I think oftentimes like a voice of a child can be a vehicle for wisdom in a way that is defamiliarized. And I really enjoy that. And I think this kind of manages to do that, but because it's dealing with children and then it's refracted through an adult's voice. So basically this is about a like staff member that works with preschool children in Uptown Montessori School in New York City. And it's just following her in one day. Courtney is someone who's recently divorced, but she's also lost a very close friend. And so it's dealing with like endings and grief. I think there's a lot of conversation now about inner children. The way that she lines that up against actual children and the learning that is happening with children as not a place of just like curiosity and fun and like play, but of survival and of loneliness. She often quotes Rilke, uses his philosophy around children to kind of frame how high stakes and how dark learning can be and how difficult learning can be. Through the thread line with all the losses in her life, she goes back to that learning and she tries to be the best person that she can. There is a respect and reverence for these little beings who their sensitivity to the world is so raw, and also how she then becomes something to reflect their learning and what she learns from the children learning. There were a lot of like really interesting questions in this. Like, sometimes the children would ask these questions, and as children can often be, they're just very existential, profound questions. And the way that these questions apply to all of these different humans' lives to varying degrees was like a little bit mind-boggling. I underlined a ton. I just had a really hard time putting down. There's also like this weird through line because the person who runs the Montessori is like dating this awful man who's like being followed by the police, and she's also kind of awful. And then weird shit happens and you're like, what is going to happen? And yeah, it was just like a lot of fun. It came as a shock to me when the child who needed a plan was me, and I was the teacher too, who was in charge of lovingly guiding me toward that plan. The child's state of not knowing. Rilke is obsessed with it. He encourages Franz, the young poet of young poet fame, to move always towards the child's state of not knowing. I appreciate Rilke's treatment of the child. He, unlike many people who idealize a possible return to the child's state of consciousness, doesn't see the not knowing in terms of innocence, whimsy, imagination. He doesn't regard the experience of a child lightly. He understands that the child's state of not knowing is not a choice. The confusion of a child is a matter of survival. For the child, it is something to be survived by wondering, by questioning, by investigating, and ingesting the answers provided by adults. Rilke's version of childhood is lonely and frightening. One has to feel their way along the filthy walls in the dark if they ever want to leave one small corner they understand. Yeah, on top of that, this was also incredibly funny. It balances the softness that is needed to interact with children and also the rigor in the questions that it was asking, but they were also paired with like an innocence because it is little ones exploring the world and her exploration through their exploration. But then also like she's dating this guy who was microdosing psilocybin and then was like hidden in the closet doing stuff to his body. Like, it's just very, it can feel a little bit absurd at times, but it's also hyper realistic. We've all had these experiences where you just pan out and you're like, what is actually going on? It just felt like an incredibly dynamic novel. And I feel like there were so many voices and so much happening, but it was also so incredibly slim. Even like the actual time parameter of the novel being a singular day in a preschool. And you also think of like a preschool as a place where adults are taking care of children, and that world can feel very small, but there's this entire universe that sprouts up of it. Courtney demonstrates how expansive that world and all the minds and all the different experiences lead to. And again, she's a poet, so there was also this beautiful lilt of language, really introspective, really funny. I had a good time. Finished it in like 2 days. I read like a couple of nonfiction. I listened to Famesick, the Lena Dunham memoir. When I was in my 20s, I watched Girls at first with like a casualness and then with rigor and then with ambivalence. So I've had like a lot of different stages when it comes to my relationship to Girls. It made enough of an impact for me to like, when I think of my 20s, I think about this show. I was curious to learn more about like the behind the scenes. I think Lena Dunham's not for everyone. I find it interesting to learn about how she came to have a show and star in this show with HBO. I think that was like an incredible opportunity. The thing that most impacted me though was learning about like all of her chronic illness and how the people in her life that were supposed to be there to like protect her, guide her, or care for her, oftentimes were the ones to harm her. And that was like really heartbreaking. The amount of like medical malpractice that this woman has gone through is insane to me. It was really impacting to see someone's voice who had been given a stage to sort of share her voice when then trying to advocate for herself, how little that voice mattered, and how every time she tried to advocate for her health and her state of being, it was kind of like ignored by professionals. That was really, really heartbreaking. It was an interesting book that I read. It didn't blow me away or anything, but like I'm not mad that I read it. I also have been moving my way through this one, On Morrison by Namwali Serpell. Serpell uses a lot of philosophy and classical text in order to understand Morrison's work. She has a beginning piece here about Morrison's difficulty and how different people have conceptualized that difficulty, how readers have positioned Morrison because of the rigor that is needed to access her texts, and how Morrison had often responded to this by saying, well, that's what reading is. The way that I've been moving through this is a little bit piecemeal because I've not read all of Morrison's work, but novels that I have read, I have been moving my way through the essays that Serpell has written. And again, I don't think there's like a correct answer, but I always think that I have gotten pretty close to what I think Morrison was trying to do, or at least what the novel means to me. And I have gathered enough evidence and enough of the text has become clear to me in the various reads of Morrison that I do. And then I read this and I was like, well, we tried. I really recommend this as like a companion piece to a Morrison novel. Serpell is such a big brain. The way that she makes understanding of Morrison's novels are insane, but I really have been enjoying reading all of the different referential texts that Morrison has been calling to in her novels. I had no idea. So to read this just for like the on difficulty chapter that she has is incredible, but I have really been enjoying going through this slowly, and I am excited to, when I read my next Morrison, have this to reference. The last book, I spoke about it briefly before, but I'm doing the personal curriculum, but in a different kind of way. I've been breaking it up into seasons. So for like my winter season, I did a philosophy course. Still working on the final project for that. And then I decided for like spring, summer, I would do a ecology course. So I've been trying to find experiential things that I can do. This is silly, but I took a hike with Girls Gone Hiking. It's a hike club in New York City. She partnered with Vivo Barefoot and we did a hike in barefoot shoes. And that was my first time ever hiking in barefoot shoes. And that was like a wild experience to feel connected to the earth in a different way, in a way that I haven't experienced before. And then I was trying to find a foraging class, but that was a little bit hit or miss. So I'm still on the lookout for that. I was talking to a friend. She did a like farm internship, so I might do that. But I also have a couple of books that I've been wanting to read just to like prime my brain in that way. And I feel like this was a perfect primer. So this is The Serviceberry by Robin Wall Kimmerer. She's the lovely author who wrote Braiding Sweetgrass, which is a book that I've tried to read a couple of times but haven't been able to get to, but it's on the list. This is basically about gift economies and reciprocal ways of living. Yeah, it's very like, como te digo, almost like common sense, but then not common sense. I think it's just like a wonderful reminder. The way that we name things, the way that we approach things, the way that we think about things. What does abundance mean to us? What does care mean to us and community mean to us in terms of like the resources that we have? What is wealth? Wealth is the ability to share with others. So all of these like small reframings that I think seem like common sense, but I think sometimes you have to hear explicitly. It was just a nice thing to read. This one is one that I read in the midst of my slumpy slump, and I read it very piecemeal while I was on transit mostly. So I'm probably going to read it again just to like really take in what she's saying. And then I have a couple of books. I think I have Enchanted Life, which is a book about mushrooms, and I'm so excited. But I'm really trying to make this personal curriculum a bit more textured. But yeah, those are the things that we read. I actually just started Liquid. Ooh, where is it? I started this baby. I had to film today, but I was like, I kind of just want to sit down and read my book. So I think we're officially out of the slump. I'm excited for summer reads. I feel like there's a lot going on this summer, and the summer also feels like, I don't know, something feels different about the energy of this summer and New York City. So I'm excited to just be open to the world. I hope you are either having an incredible summer already or are gearing up for some fun summery things. Let me know what you're up to, what you're thinking of doing this summer. As always, let me know what you're reading. Is it good? Should I pick it up too? I think that's it. We'll see each other soon. Bye.